Well, welcome. I'm Tom Laux, Communications Director, City of Marshfield, and it's council preview time. That means our City Administrator, Steve Barg, is sitting next to me.
Good to be here with you, Tom.
All right. Well, we have a council meeting coming up. It's the second one of the month of February, 6 p.m. on Tuesday. We got a few things to talk about on the agenda. But first, let's get some updates with Mayor McManus and Mr. Gramza.
Yeah, a lot of people are asking, and as you know, over the past couple months, we haven't been able to say a lot. I hope the public appreciates that and can have patience, especially with the case with Chief Gramza, because this is confidential personnel matter, involves labor law attorneys and a lot of different issues that make it hard for us to be as transparent as we'd like. But just the update right now, first of all, on the mayor. The council did have a special meeting on February 2nd. We may have talked about it at our last council preview, but they did approve 5 motions directing the council president, Tom Witzel, and me to work on some details to get a hearing scheduled on the matter. Now, again, for people who haven't heard about this, a hearing on the mayor, what are you talking about? Well, there's a statute in Wisconsin law, not often used, but Chapter 17, that does provide for the possible removal of an elected official by the body. And it started with a complaint that we received from a member of the public. It was discussed, or at least reviewed briefly, by the council in closed session, and they are having a hearing, which is standard practice. We don't have a date on it yet, working on that, but we do have an attorney lined up now to work with us. He'll be representing and working with the council. And you say, well, why not the city attorney? City attorney has to step aside in this particular matter. We need someone from outside. So, the hearing will probably occur in the coming weeks. In order for the mayor to be removed, 75% of the council members would have to vote for that, which would be 8 out of 10 in our circumstance. But getting ahead of ourselves, the council will have a thoughtful hearing. The mayor will have a chance to be represented by council if he wishes, and he certainly will represent himself with some of his thoughts about the complaint, and we'll just see what transpires at that point.
All right. Do you see this happening hopefully in the next 2 months or next month, you're saying?
No, definitely. I would think. I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to put a timeline on it. Soon after we tape this program, I'll be talking with the attorney that we got from the Fox Valley area and asking, what his timeline is and finding out what he needs to do to prepare. And then we'll be serving notice on the mayor, getting the date set up. I would definitely like to think it's within the timeline that you mentioned in that time period. Prior to April, hopefully, or by the very 1st of April at the latest. But I won't know more until I talk with the attorney and figure out what his needs are and get everybody's schedules worked out. But everybody wants this to be the sooner the better. If there's any concerns with the mayor where they think this might be warranted, or if they think there isn't, we need to put this behind us one way or another and get on with other city business.
All righty. Let's move over to Chief Gramza. It's a little bit different situation, but that would also be a hearing, correct? Yeah,
and actually there's 2 separate matters going on with Chief Gramza. Maybe people are following it at this point. It's been in some news reports locally here and on Wausau TV. The criminal matter is going forward. I believe there's another hearing coming up here soon. That's apart from the city. Some people say, well, Steve, are you going down to Wisconsin Rapids? Well, there's a court proceeding. Why aren't you there? That's not really our deal from an administration standpoint. Ours is working with the labor law attorneys and all the other parties on the hearing that's going to PFC. The city has recommended through me that we consider terminating Chief Gramza for violations of various personnel policies and so on, and that'll be heard by the PFC. Right now the date has been set. The first date of a number of days is supposed to be March 10th, Wednesday, March 10th, and the hearing itself is expected to last several days, Tom, over a 2-week period, 2.5 weeks actually. And I know that might sound weird to people because it's going to be broken up by some days on, days off. But we want to get through that one thoughtfully. It's going to be a proceeding that we want to make sure is done orderly and everybody being represented fairly, getting a chance to be heard. And that's what's going to happen, it appears, in March.
All right. So I don't want to say council, but the PFC, Police and Fire Commission, are the ones that would be listening to and making a decision.
Yeah, this is entirely in the Police and Fire Commission's jurisdiction. Many people don't know this, but they have optional powers here in the city of Marshfield, and they are fully responsible under state law, actually, for making this decision about whether the chief should be terminated or if some other disciplinary action should be taken instead, or whatever happens. They're the ones who are going to make the final call on that decision. And it's a weighty thing. I want to take a moment to applaud our Fire and Police Commission members. You know, they've taken some criticism along the way here unfairly because they really haven't been a part of dictating the timeline of this process. But we're thankful that they serve and that they'll be the ones doing this hearing.
Alrighty. Well, that helps us better understand where this is going to go. You're going to keep us updated, as well as I'm sure local media, as things change or dates or times are set. Should we just look forward to that?
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I want to ask for the public's patience if we can, Tom, because I know in the last few months there have been people who have come to the council meetings, you've been there, and they've come to citizen comments and said, why aren't you guys being more transparent? You know, tell us what's going on. This is too secretive. I hope over the last few months we've tried to articulate why we've had to do what we can to make sure that everybody is treated fairly and that the confidential information is protected as we head toward this hearing. But again, like I said, now we appear to be within a month of the time that the hearing is going to begin.
All right. I did have one question, and I'm not sure if you can answer it, but I'll ask you anyway. What's the difference between like a police officer or any employee such as myself? If it had to come to that, would it be the same for all city employees if you had to terminate an employee, or is it different because of maybe negotiation, bargaining, and police?
Well, it's not so much contractual as it is state law. That to dismiss a peace officer, whether it be a patrol man or woman, or in this case the chief, that they have certain protections and they have their right to a hearing. So this is actually fairly standard process. You see it sometimes across the state for an officer who maybe has done something questionable that suggests maybe they shouldn't be employed anymore. But this would not happen for people like you or me. We're not under that same statutory restriction.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. I know some people have asked that in our social media comments that I've heard, and hopefully that'll help better explain that.
Yep.
Well, let's move right into our agenda here that's going to happen on Tuesday. And let's go right into consent agenda. On Monday evening, they talked about a street sweeper. That's a pretty good sized purchase, but it's an important one.
It is, and this is one of those pieces of equipment that a lot of people don't see operating. Sometimes it's done in the very early morning or hours when people are not out driving around, but it's a critical piece of equipment, not just to keep the streets clean, but to maintain the storm sewer system, trying to get that stuff out so that it doesn't wash into the catch basins and end up going into the storm sewer pipes and having to be dealt with that way. So the current unit is about 10 years old, and we bought it for $202,000. But Tom, one of the things we look at in coming to the Board of Public Works and discussing whether or not we ought to replace it or continue to fix it or what is the maintenance and repair history. And looking at the memo from Chris Hawley, in the last few years we've spent $60,000 on maintenance and repair costs. Well, that's 30% of the value of what we paid for it. And it does appear that it's in our best interest to replace it. I will tell you this, though, that the Board of Public Works has asked some really good questions lately, saying, well, wait a minute. Are we getting the most useful life out of this equipment? Just because something is 10 years old or 12 years old doesn't mean we can't, find a way to keep it running. We all do that with our personal vehicles, sometimes. And I think they've helped us to sharpen our pencils, too, to make sure that we're bringing forward these kind of circumstances where we really do need to replace, where we have substandard equipment or equipment that's costing us way more than it's worth. Chris Hawley does a great job as our street superintendent, and he's brought this forward. The board is supportive, and I'm hopeful that the council will be as well. We did get bids, as we always do. We got 3 bids, and we're proposing the lowest bid, a Johnston RS 655, which doesn't mean anything to me as a non-street sweeper person, but for $241,000. But again, it's the lowest of the 3 bids, and we did competitive pricing as we always do. I always want the public to know that we're not just taking whoever we want to, regardless of cost.
All right. The old one, I believe, is going to be traded in, I think, as the discussion I was hearing on our public works meetings. So probably don't want that around because it is, I call it a money pit.
Yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately, that happens in anything, and you can't control that. Sometimes you call it a lemon.
Yeah, and that's true. And we look at all the options when we're looking at disposing of an old piece of equipment or vehicle. Sometimes trading in is the best option. Other times selling it at auction. The state has an auction site, and other things can be done. And again, the people who do some of this stuff do a great job. Dan Kinneck, our Public Works Director, is involved in these decisions, working with people like Chris Hawley. In this case, it made the most sense, as you said, to trade it in. We weren't going to get a lot for it. One wouldn't think on the auction or any place else.
Right. All right, let's talk about our final assessments on the Cleveland Street project that was worked on all last year. Nice road, a lot of big improvements, and you had brought me over a big list. What does this mean for final assessments? Well,
as often happens, the estimated assessments that people were told when the project was beginning, we've come in under that. And so people should be pleased if they live along West Cleveland Street, that they're going to have to pay less for their share of the improvements. There's actually a spreadsheet you're looking at right now, and it's out there on our website. I know for sure it's, if you look up the agenda packet from the last Board of Public Works meeting, you'll see it. I may well put that in the council packet as well, I'm not sure. But you can look at it, and if you're affected by this, you might say, wait a minute, I'm going to get a bill for $2,500. What about my neighbor? He's got more stuff going on than I do. He had to have his driveway replaced or whatever. You can actually see what everyone is going to pay for what they got. And again, most of the cost of these improvements, Tom, is picked up by the city. But the abutting property owners on each side do have to pay their share of some of the improvements. And we try to keep the cost down, but it's fair given the fact that they're getting an upgrade.
Okay, so just so I understand this and our viewers do, there is more cost than we're seeing on this spreadsheet to the city.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
A lot more cost.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, the lion's share of the cost is being picked up on a project like this by the city. But again, you look at some of the people, and they'll be paying $3,000, $4,000, maybe $5,000, and that's a lot of money to a homeowner. But in the scope of what the project cost, the city is still the front runner.
All right. Well, we also have an approval of interest rate, which really has a part of this. So we're going to dovetail into that.
Right.
2021 special projects, that's not this one, because the interest, or is that part of this too?
No, the interest rate for that is set. And again, what you're heading toward is you can pay, up front. Let's say I'm looking at one property owner right now on your sheet that owes, $850. And he or she might be thinking, hey, let's just pay $850 and get it off our list of things to take care of. Somebody else might say, you know what, mine is $4,000 or whatever it is. I'd like to pay it over a period of years. So the city will do that for you, but we don't do it at no cost because we had to borrow the money to do the project, and that costs money. So what we do in the memo you're looking at right now, what we do is we say, okay, whatever the city has borrowed the money at most recently, we'll tack on 2% to that for our cost of administration, keeping track of all this internally and collecting the monies from people, recording it. We'll add 2% on. So for this year, the last borrowings that we've done last year was about a 1.9 interest rate. So if anybody wants to, for the 2021 projects coming up, if they say, yeah, I'd like to spread it out over time, 3.9% will be used on those. I think if you're looking at 2020, and that's what Cleveland Street would be, it was a little bit higher. The interest rate applied to those doing an installment plan would be 4.6%. We hope that's reasonable. We usually don't get many complaints. Like I said, we certainly can't have our staff do all the work associated with an installment plan for no cost.
Now, is this interest rate, I'm just curious, asking a question, the same interest rate we would get to do our fair, the cost of this, or is it a little different?
It's not looking forward, it's looking back. So when you look at the 2021 interest rate, you see that it says the city borrowed at 1.9% there. We did 2 borrowings last year, Tom, and that was the average of the 2. So now when we look at the 2022 assessments, we'll look back at 2021 and say, what did we borrow money for in 2021, and then tack on 2% to that.
Okay, so is that part of the, like our CIP idea? When you put money, you borrow money for those projects, that's not really getting money from for the project from the landowner. The city has its
right.
own.
We plan on paying for the whole project. When we do a project and we put it in the CIP, I believe we expect that no one's going to pay on installment. I mean, we just base on the idea that we have to borrow this much money to do the project, and then as special assessments come in, many people pay on installment. That additional interest, comes back into the city's coffers. But we borrow what we need to do to construct the street.
All right. Well, that helps a little bit. You know, I kind of want to know how the process works, get to know your job and Ron's job and also Dan's job, because all three of you got to make sure this works. And we got to have roads, otherwise we'll be cobblestone, and that's probably not a good option.
That makes you think the road is going to be cobblestone.
Although some cities still have those kind of bricks, and amazing how long they have lasted over the years. It's the stuff that's underneath.
Right. Yeah, and what really kills roads is bad subgrade and bad drainage. And people don't realize that that's what really is destroying. Well, I'm messing up all my paperwork here, and now we're going to move into, I don't want to miss a piece here, debt management. That's important part of our process. It is, and our debt management policy was updated by Ron Allman, our finance director, and what he's doing is he's saying, okay, we've got a policy called 4.900, and it talks about how the city should be monitoring how much it can borrow and how to account for it and stuff like that. And tracking with some dashboard type things that tell us when we're out of sync, and realizing that it's out of sync a little bit. We needed to update it. For example, we've had a line in our policy for a long time, Tom, that says no more than $1,500 per capita debt. $1,500 per person. Well, the city's been kind of stagnant for a while in population, between 19 and 20,000. Well, the cost of these projects have gone up. The cost of roads, the cost of borrowing's gone up. So if you say, well, we can only have debt up to $1,500 per person, $1,500 per person is no longer what it was back in 2000. So these policies need to be updated. I think the main thing people need to know is that we are really watching our debt closely. The state says that we can borrow up to 65% of what our equalized value is, but we don't want to go there. I'm sorry, 5%. I apologize. 5% of our total equalized value. The city says that we want to stay within 65% of that. So we want to borrow less than the state tells us we can. And that's just one of the limits that we put in place to make sure that we don't find ourselves up to our eyeballs. Like a person at home doesn't want to find themselves in credit card and other debt beyond what they can pay. And we've done a good job. In recent years, we've brought our debt down as a percentage a little bit, and we're kind of inching it down. Our goal every year, Tom, is to pay off more in principal than we take on a new borrowing. That helps us to whittle away that debt load numerically and as a percentage. And it gives us a better credit rating as well. Which is important. And that came up in the council or in the Finance, Budget and Personnel Committee the other day, is we took a hit on our credit rating a couple of years ago. And Moody's put a placeholder in and they said, look, it's called a negative outlook. If you don't do something in the next year or two, you might drop another notch. Well, we're hoping as we meet with them soon for an upcoming borrowing, and Ron's actually seen some indication of this from the utilities borrowing, that the tax rate increase we did, the cutting costs, some of the other things has put us in a place now where they'll probably look at us more favorably. We probably won't regain that step in the borrowing rating, but we'll, at least not now, but we'll likely stabilize and hopefully move back to where we were 3 years ago. All right. Marshfield Utilities, I believe it's part of the project, their big project, right? It is. This is going to confuse people. They're going to say, wait a minute, back on January, whatever the date was, there was a big discussion. The council voted 5-5, and the mayor broke it to allow them to go forward with their project. What's this about? Well, this came from an earlier permit that they were given, and one of the conditions that they had to do was to consolidate all these parcels into one and make this work, and then rezone it from single-family residential to general industrial. This gets everything together, all together as one at 2000 South Central Avenue. So the Planning Commission reviewed it, and they found it to be acceptable. It's really, to some people, you might view it as housekeeping, but zoning is important, and you want to have the properties all together, and you want to have it zoned properly so that you can tell the world this is in fitting with what it's permitted for. But this is just one more step on getting them going. My understanding, Tom, is since the approval of council in January, they're marching down the road toward construction of their new building, and looking forward to that. Yeah, and I know that trees were one of the discussion. I'm sure they're planning on what they're going to do with all those trees, and I'm sure as we get information from Nick Cum, we'll provide it on this show or a different show. Yeah, and again, one of the things we really are thankful to Nick and his group for is working with the city, because we're going to have a Van de Hey Waters right next to it, and there was a lot of concern, if you remember, Tom, about could these two things, our new aquatic center and their expanded building, could they coexist without infringing too much? And I really want to thank Nick and the commission, everybody over at Marshfield Utilities, and working with us and their consultant as well to make it the best possible fit for those two uses.
All right. We'll see what that is. Is that an actual vote that has to happen?
It'll be. I believe it's a first reading, on Tuesday night, and that's where you get questions from the council, and then it will be brought back on March 9th for a second reading and final approval.
All right. Well, March 9th, that date just sounds good because it reminds me of spring.
Oh my gosh. You know, as we do the show today, it was 11 below this morning, and I think we're all wearing out. And spring sounds really, really good.
It does, most definitely. Oh, we got sewer plan. That's important piece if we want to grow in the city.
It is, and this is one of those things that kind of flies below the radar. But what we're doing is updating our sewer service area plan for the period from 2020 to 2040. I realize we're in 2021 now. Plan Commission did approve it last fall. And the council is going to see it now. It's gotten blessed by the DNR. That's an important part of the process before council can take action. But what this does, Tom, is it says, okay, what's our sanitary sewer infrastructure? And as we grow, people want to annex. Let's say you own property just outside the city, and you call me and say, Steve, I want to take my 40 acres here and divide it and get some houses built. Can I do it? Well, where are we positioned to grow? Where are we positioned to serve in the next 10, 20 years? And that will determine a lot of things. That determines our long-term plans, our comprehensive plan. We can tell developers, this is where we're looking at growing, and this is not where we're looking at growing based upon the infrastructure and the availability of services. So, like I said, it's been run by the state authorities. The DNR has given its thumbs up. And if the council does, that will be our guiding document looking forward at planning for utilities and where they go.
Well, it's important to have that because that helps growth, and a lot of our industrial parks have that sewer plan involved, and that's what gets. They need that. These businesses need that to hook up. They don't want to. If it's not there, that's a pretty big expense.
Yeah, and I'm reading right from the North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. They weighed in on this, and they said that this is important to ensure that the observed demand for development on the edges of the city can be accommodated by sewer service. In other words, as we grow, do we really have the capacity to appropriately meet the needs? And that's an important consideration when you're talking to landowners and developers.
Well, we have enough land, though. I mean, we're not landlocked here in Marshfield, so there is quite a bit of land, correct?
Well, there is, but you look at where a lot of people want to talk to us about sometimes. It might be in the town of McMillan. It might be in the town of Lincoln, and they own property, and they say, look, I want to annex to the city. As you grow, is it possible that services will be run out farther west? What would it take? Is it going to take lift stations? Is it going to take more cost and expense? Am I going to have to pay a lot? People want to know where you're expecting to grow, in what time frame. And again, I haven't read this document closely, so I'm kind of ad-libbing a little bit. But the sewer area service plan really lays out the framework for what people can expect in the coming 20 years.
Yeah, and sewer is a big deal, and then you got to talk about electrical and all that. So this is just plan one of a site.
Yeah, and this is stuff that the average person maybe is listening to us and thinking, well, Steve, I want to hear about actual development. I want to hear about who's going to build in Marshfield, what new stores, what new restaurants. And I get that. But this is the groundwork, the foundation that helps us determine where we can grow as the city moves out, and what are the constraints.
Yes, definitely.
So.
All right. Well, we went through the list that you had brought me. Anything else comes to mind that you want to bring it up? I think we went through everything.
Well, as we look ahead, the CIP, Capital Improvement Program, is on the radar. Right now it's being worked at staff level, but soon we're going to be hearing about it at the elected officials level as we get into the spring. We have a couple of elections coming up in April. One seat is contested, I believe, with another person on the ballot. Another one is a registered write-in. So we'll see if the council changes at all in April, or if they do not. And then, of course, we'll continue to track the cases that people are talking about, the issues related to the police chief and mayor. And again, I just want to say one last time, I think they're being handled very thoughtfully, and that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that we handle these in a way that's appropriate and fair to everybody. And and we'll see what the resolutions end up being.
Alrighty, Steve. Thank you so much, and we'll sign off and come back a few weeks from now and talk about our March Common Council meeting. I'm sure there'll be a lot of changes between now and then with the things that you just mentioned with the mayor and Chief Gramza. If we can bring stuff before this program, we sure will. from your standpoint? We'll wait till you are able to release anything.
Yeah, I'm always happy to share what I'm allowed to, and many times the cases I can't.
Yep.
But thanks, Tom, and we look forward to moving forward.
Alrighty. Well, I want to thank our viewers for watching Steve and I on our council preview program. We get to do this twice a month. It's an exciting time to do that and get that information out before the council meeting starts. So again, thank you for watching.